Okay, the obvious question that we make that we're really celebrating Hanukkah for 8 days, because really to celebrate a holiday for that amount of time, because something happens unique in that amount of time, and therefore you can't compare, for example, let's say the miracle of the war. The war you celebrate one day, like Purim, you celebrate they won a war. It lasted for a bunch of time, but you commemorate in one moment, and that's it, and you're done. If you're commemorating something time and time again, 8 days, that means you're celebrating a miracle, and that's why the 8 days are instituted specifically because of the candles that were burning in the Beit HaMikdash. But then the question becomes, we do find other times that the candles burnt for longer than a natural order. For example, this tent of Sarat, it says Hidliku bo v'nidlak, and it was nidlak me Shabbat to Shabbat. That means for 7 days it was lighting. So what's unique? Because it burnt for another day instead of 7-8 days. That doesn't justify, that doesn't satisfy the question. So in general, there's a lot of talk about this topic. It's a question of the Bet Yosef. Everybody deals with it. If you want to categorize it just in the thought process runs in two different ways, and that people try to solve it. One is the different variations of the same thought process where, well, look, there was the miraculous part of this oil was that it replenished itself, as in oil burns. You have a candle, it's for an hour, it's going to burn for an hour. Now, what happens after that hour? You're going to have to provide new oil. Where'd that new oil come from? That was the miracle. It replenished itself. The obvious question that they ask, well, because if that's the case, it says olive oil. Well, that's not olive oil. That was burnt. That's oil. That's God made. The way to deal with that is you just say that it had all the characteristics of olive oil. There's another way of going about it and saying, well, this oil was unique in the way that it had better battery life. So regular amount of oil typically means it translates to amount of time it will burn. This olive oil that they did find was miraculous in the sense that it had better candle life, and it lasted for longer than just the expected time, and therefore made it to 8 days. But that generates a question because it says v'ten la midasa. That's the words of the pasuk. It says you have to give the required amount every morning, or every night. You have to give the required amount. So if you have to give the required amount, well, guess what? The second day doesn't have the required amount because it burnt less because it had better candle life, but it still burnt an amount, and therefore it's not complete. So there's a third way that really puts this into a different category miracle, and therefore it makes it justified why we celebrate this over just the candles of Sarah and Rivka, which the other two options don't really give you a clear distinction. The obvious thing that happens when something burns is the oil needs to finish, because the oil is providing the life for the flame, so the flame diminishes the life of the oil, and that's what makes it a fire. And that very idea that it made it into a fire is where the actual miracle took place, where as much as it was burning, it never lost the amount. So that's something that you can't explain, because in our world we work with a certain structure. If the fire is burning, that means the oil is diminishing. And if you want to solve that, you could say either it was replenished miraculously or it burnt less. You can't say it didn't burn at all. And that is the miracle. That is the miracle that took place here, and that's why it's so unique. Is that in the time of Sarah and Rivka, well, you could just say that it was. First of all, you could just say that it was a miraculous fire and that burnt longer. You don't need to say that it. You don't need to say this crazy thing where it's burning, and even though it's burning, the oil is not diminishing, and that resolves both of these problems, because you're creating a space of a true miracle that didn't remove the qualities we need for the olive oil of the Beit HaMikdash. It was 100% natural oil. This is the same oil that you inserted initially. And last point is that it was always had the right amount. It was 10 nanometers the entire time. This reminds you. Now it's very interesting. Another place we found the fire. Where was it? In the sneh. It says the sneh enenukal, that the sneh did not get burnt. So seemingly it's trying to say the same idea that we're saying here, that there's a fire, but the fire is not burning. But outside of the fact that you don't need to say it was actual physical fire, you could also say it says Vayar malach Hashem elav b'libat esh. Hashem revealed himself in the flame of the fire, mitoch hasneh, from within the flame. It doesn't say shebasneh. It says mitoch, that it was inside. It doesn't seem to say that the fuel of the sneh, the fuel of the flame that was found within the flame was found within the sneh. It doesn't say, like it says over here, that the oil itself was burning was the source of this fire. Another interesting thing is, okay, so where do we find this idea? We find this idea also by makom ha'aron eno min hamidah. Because, like, what makes it there's this very specifications that you need it on the second foot on one side to reach the second foot of the other side, or it has to be it's fitting a dimension. It fits in a blueprint where the aron needs to be located, and at that very time where it's satisfying the requirements of that blueprint, of the dimensions, of the measurements, it still defies it. So that is the uniqueness of this mitzvah too, meaning in order for it to be satisfying the requirements of lighting in the Bet HaMikdash, it has to be physical oil, and it has to be oil that's being able to be burnt. That's the flame. It has to be 100% natural flame. At that very moment, we're defying it. So obviously, as we take all these things to the service of Hashem, one service to Hashem, it works. There is obviously a natural order, and then everybody serves Hashem with meaning the basis of Yahadut is that one's committed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'kabbalat ol b'mesirut nefesh, meaning push comes to shove, everybody, meaning that's the defining fundamental. The question is it something that we need to remember once in the morning and then we could go as we could go natural courses or default, or is it something that needs to be we have to kavua b'libot tamid mamash? I think there's a lashon that says shu kavua b'libot tamid, meaning it's not something that he remembers. It's something that he is felt, is conscious of at all times. But even that mesirat nefesh, right? Because when is it required more effort? When there's more detraction, or there's more. So the question is, what kind of detraction is there? Is there just because the choshech is big, and the choshech it's doing its natural thing, that it covers on kedusha and it makes it more difficult to do Torah mitzvot. So therefore a person needs to put more effort. So therefore he has mesirat nefesh. But then there's a different kind of choshech, and this kind of choshech is where it's fighting the core essence. It's fighting the core fundamentals. It's questioning the entire validity of the existence of the Yahadut. Basically it's an existential question. So here, it's not required. It's even though that both of them require mesirat nefesh, but one mesirat nefesh is just remembering that instilling more energy and more effort. That's one thing. That person says there's no alternative. Another thing is that his entire work it took on the nature of. It's not only that he's remembering in order to do his natural order, his natural requirements. Over here, because he's fighting an existential threat, so then everything that he's doing, it takes on the mesirat nefesh that he's fulfilling. And that is a constant, meaning there's no point in time where a person could say, well, this moment is, meaning because it's an existential thing, so every time you're recreating that bond, you're recommitting yourself to that commitment. There's no point in time that you could fall off to a default. And therefore, the miracle that Hashem showed us was that same idea. At every given moment throughout the days of Chanuka, there was another miracle being generated, because at every moment that oil had to be diminished, and it wasn't. And this is the idea and that's why it's also chatum b'chotamo shel kohen gadol, meaning there's an unblemished space, and that unblemished space is able to generate this kind of miracle. And that's also within us. it awakens that unblemished space, that it could impact every single moment, and that is this is the only reason why they had the ability to fulfill this to express this Mesirut Nefesh. Bezrat Hashem, that's by Vavaya Yagia Choshki, meaning specifically from the Kadosh Baruch Hu, from Atzmuta Ma'atzil, from the Kadosh Baruch Hu at its core. We could address the deepest and darkest places that deny his existence, and not only deny it, but illuminate his existence within their specific frameworks that they exist, that they live with. Bezrat Hashem.